Today's video is sponsored by Raycon, an audio electronic company that specializes in earbuds that are affordable and used by people like Snoop Dogg. I guess. I love Raycon's everyday E25 wireless earbuds and use them on a regular basis when I'm working around the house or doing some hobbying. The earbuds stay in my ears comfortably, they don't fall out when doing chores, and I can use them to listen to my favorite podcast to help me get ready for the day or listen to some music to relax to. Plus, they're super affordable and come with a bunch of different color options to customize the earbuds to your choosing, and they sound great. The earbuds also come with this really slick charging case that can charge the headphones up to 4 times on the go, and the earbuds have a 6-hour charge so you can listen to pretty much anything for as long as you want. They hold really well, and best of all, you can get them at an even lower price when you visit buyraycon.com/Magikarp and get 15% off your order today. That's buyraycon.com/Magikarp to get 15% off your order today. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video, and let's get right into it.
It's no secret that Avatar, and especially Korra, aren't typical kind of Nickelodeon fare, and so they've had a kind of a hard time trying to fit it into their programming. And then obviously, as you've seen, not so much on the channel. So it's just part of this shift over. It definitely caught us by surprise. It wasn't necessarily done in the smoothest way, and that was upsetting to many of you and to us as well. So it's moving over to digital. This is actually, it was a plan that was kind of in place earlier. They changed course and they went back to it. So it all kind of happened in a little bit of a messy way. But thanks for sticking with us. The show is not canceled.
Yeah, the thing we definitely want you guys to...
A simple watch-through of The Legend of Korra, a spin-off-esque sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender, will show you that the show is an absolute mess. Do a Google search and you'll find people complaining about the show through literally any means necessary. Compared to the original, The Legend of Korra simply does not stack up. But there are pieces of it that do shine through in the turd that is The Legend of Korra. Now, I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. There are problems with it. In fact, there's a lot of problems with it. But honestly, I really want to know what the show would have been like in a different time. On its release, Korra never really even had a leg to stand on. Constantly hit with wondering whether the show would continue, budget cuts, legal problems, having the show be pulled halfway through a season, switching animation companies on a dime. It was in all a terrible way that Nickelodeon treated the show, and when you put all of that together, you can kind of understand why the show was so misguided in the first place. This is the sad story of Nickelodeon versus The Legend of Korra. When Avatar: The Last Airbender was released, it was an automatic hit and was completely groundbreaking at the time. From the new art style that people watching Nickelodeon were not used to also being a serialized dramatic cartoon show, it broke grounds when it launched. On development, they already knew that the show was going to have a 3-season story arc, so the developers had a lot of playroom to work with in an environment not suited for an ongoing story arc. Because although popular in Eastern media like an anime, in the West, most TV shows are broadcasted as contained single episodes. A serialized show, however, has an overarching plot throughout each season or throughout the entire show as a whole. Every episode moves the plot along, and in order to keep up, you have to watch the last aired episode, which was very uncommon at the time when it came to westernized media. It wasn't until the advent of streaming services like Netflix, where you can binge watch an entire series, that serialized television became even more popular. Also because of shows like The Sopranos, Walking Dead, and Breaking Bad, but now we've got shows like The Mandalorian, Loki, House of Cards, Cobra Kai, and basically any show put up as a streaming service series original is going to probably be serialized because of binge watching. So when Avatar was first released, it was pretty ballsy of Nickelodeon to decide on creating a serialized TV show on a network built around episodic media, so they can rinse and repeat the shows with reruns. This kept their kid viewers interested, since time slots really didn't matter when every show being aired was episodic and they didn't have to watch previous ones to enjoy the show. I mean, SpongeBob, guys. Nick at Night was literally the rerun central of 90s TV shows. So when Avatar hit the scene, it was a big deal because it was not only serialized, it also wasn't Americanized, which was another huge hurdle that they overcame. The animation style was different, and it touched on heavy topics like totalitarianism, war, and genocide. I mean, like, you guys ever think Tommy Pickles ever thought about genocide? Now, there are heavy topics brought into the world of children. I mean, for me, I grew up watching Dragon Ball Z and Eastern media like anime, so I was totally used to genocide. But at the time, not a lot of other people were. But The Last Airbender hit the nail right on the head. So what the hell happened with The Legend of Korra? Well, let's rewind back to Avatar. Not the bald one, but the blue one. In 2005, Avatar: The Last Airbender was released to critical acclaim and became a groundbreaking TV show. And then in 2009, James Cameron came in and said, "What up, bitches?" and created Avatar, copywriting the name, which meant that everything else past that movie could not have the name Avatar in it. I mean, like, you guys ever notice that it's not called Avatar: The Legend of Korra, but just The Legend of Korra? You ever wonder why that shitty Avatar movie was called The Last Airbender? Yeah. You can thank James Cameron for that one. Honestly, it's really not that big of a deal because copyright issues happen all the time. But when you have an IP whose name gets literally thrown out the window, you start to see some problems, and Nickelodeon kind of washing their hands of the franchise. You can clearly see it when they announced The Last Airbender live action film, arguably a movie that should be considered for a Razzie. When the film was first announced, original creators of the beloved Avatar: The Last Airbender TV show both were under the assumption that they would be able to help out with the movie. Turns out, that wasn't true at all. When they were trying to give input, it was just pushed off to the side and was never realized in a full movie format, meaning they basically had no say in what was happening in the live action adaptation. So instead, we got one of the worst movie adaptations in the world for a cartoon. In fact, it was such a huge travesty that they completely canceled the trilogy for the series. Do you know how bad that is? I mean, for fuck's sake, 50 Shades of Grey still got their trilogy. This was on an entirely other level. The movie wound up costing $150 million, with over $130 million of it being spent on just marketing, and ended up getting a grand total of 5% on Rotten Tomatoes. Even though the movie made $300 million worldwide, it still went over budget, considering that Nickelodeon was willing to pay $250 million for the entire trilogy. So already, the precursor for the setup of a new Avatar show, Last Airbender show, was going to already have a bad light shined upon it, and Nickelodeon had really no idea how to rectify the situation. This was then followed up in 2012 with The Legend of Korra. Coming off of the failure of the movie, Nickelodeon first slated The Legend of Korra as a 12-episode miniseries. No more and no less. This is compared to the original show that aired with 20 episodes in the first season. So obviously, Nickelodeon was already apprehensive with what The Legend of Korra would provide for the studio. So when DiMartino and Konietzko started on Korra, they made the show to be neatly tied up in a little bow for the studio. A one single season meant to be a one and done miniseries. Now, if you think about it already, that meant Korra could not possibly live up to the story of The Last Airbender. It was literally impossible. Think back at how Avatar set up this huge world and dilemma where Aang had to learn every single element in order to stop a war. That's such a huge epic that containing the next story into one single miniseries would not be able to live up to an entire 3-season story arc that was, one, already predetermined to happen, and two, was given the full backing and publicity from the Nickelodeon network. However, one single miniseries, fine, good to go. You know, we'll take it. So the show was announced in 2010 and originally set to air in 2011. However, the show was pushed back multiple times because the leading character was a female. Quoting from Konietzko, paraphrasing Nickelodeon's stance on Korra, girls will watch shows about boys, but boys won't watch shows about girls. What? What the fuck? Isn't this the same network that made Zoe 101, iCarly, and Victorious? I mean, like, what about Wild Thornberries? As told by Ginger, what the hell are you guys talking about? Again, Nickelodeon really felt like Korra wouldn't be successful, and so just greenlit the miniseries thinking a female lead would cause the show to not be interesting. Guess what? Bah! People loved it. Granted, there were some problems with the show in terms of being more Americanized due to DiMartino and Konietzko literally being the only writers for Korra. I mean, it was a miniseries, so I'm guessing the budget wasn't that big. Still, people enjoyed the season. Season 1 of The Legend of Korra, although it had some problems, definitely stood on its own feet, and when Nickelodeon saw that the reception for Korra was good, they decided to make another season for 26 episodes in total. It wasn't, hey, let's put you guys on for 3 more seasons. No. It was only for one single season. That means we've gone from a single mini-series where The Legend of Korra was only supposed to last for 12 episodes, all wrapped up because Nickelodeon didn't think it was going to be good, to now doing another season entirely. That's not good for a serialized TV show, and you see it all the time with movies that get a sequel that wasn't intended. You know, we're looking at movies like Jaws, Anchorman, Donnie Darko, the list goes on and on where companies see the success of a movie, and in order to keep chasing the cash flow, they just start milking the series until you have a bad taste in your mouth for the franchise. So now, having Korra go into a second season when the show was literally done, the creators now had to make another season with another storyline, and that was going to be the end of it. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. The second season felt rushed, it felt weird, the animation was not as good, and the characters still were not fleshed out at all. In fact, the original studio that worked on the first season of Studio Mir didn't even animate part of the show because they already had obligations to do the animation for the Boondocks. Literally no one expected season 2 to even happen. So again, they made the next season, and it was arguably the worst season of the entire Avatar franchise. But then guess what? Nickelodeon renewed for a 52 episode run for a total of 4 seasons. What the fuck? This is where we really kind of understood the trajectory that The Legend of Korra could actually move towards. They finally got the time and resources to make the series into something that could be enjoyable. Again, they can't recreate an epic because now it's only 2 seasons long, so how do you create an epic out of 26 episodes without just doing a refresh in the next season? So this is a very common thing that TV shows do, where every season you could have an overarching villain, or what Buffy the Vampire Slayer deemed as a big bad for the season. A lot of shows do this, like The Arrow, The Flash, Walking Dead, hell, even Breaking Bad. Which is fine, because the last 2 seasons of Korra felt correct in the trajectory of how they wanted the show to be. There were good villains, cool. More side character development, awesome, love it. More world building, amazing. And then Nickelodeon fucked it all up again. By the time the first episode of season 3 even aired, Nickelodeon Mexico leaked episodes 3 to 6 out into the public. Konietzko wrote on Tumblr, "It is bad enough that it happened at all, but it would have been less of a disaster had it at least been the first 4 episodes of the season. The release of later episodes led to confusion and frustration." So right off the bat, people were already watching the show out of order, and the leaks caused less people to even watch the show when it premiered. Not only that, but coming up to season 3 of the show, Nickelodeon barely promoted the season on their network. And yeah, season 2 was bad, but it was bad because Nickelodeon never wanted to even give it a chance, which is ridiculous. So then they doubled down and decide to now not even promote the show at all for possibly the best season out of The Legend of Korra. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. With no promotion, the audience now completely lost on what's going on. The fact that the show even changed time slots multiple times, so it was hard to even understand when an episode was premiering. The TV show's ratings plummeted straight into the ground. Man, who would have thought that if something isn't promoted, people wouldn't watch it? Interesting. On top of that, by episode 8, Nickelodeon decided to do something absolutely ridiculous. They took the show and aired the rest of it online at nick.com. No announcements, nothing. It just happened. They didn't wait for the season to end. They didn't start off on the website. They literally pulled it from the network and placed it online. Why the hell would you ever do that? Budgeting for the show also started to take a hit, and season 4 had the worst of it. Not only was it now not going to premiere on the network, but the budget for the show was cut down to what the creator said about the budget for a single episode. In a couple of hours, the 8th chapter of Korra Book 4 will be released online, and I suppose if you are none the wiser, a few minutes into it, you will feel duped and yell at your screen, "Hey, this is a crummy Clips episode." And that is almost exactly what it is. Except we all worked really hard to make sure, at the very least, it isn't crummy. I'm here to explain why we ended up having to do one. Sometime around a year and a half ago, we were similarly duped on a large scale. We got the news from the higher ups that our Book 4 budget was getting slashed, almost to the tune of an entire episode's budget. We had two options. One, let go of a significant number of crew members several weeks early, or two, make a Clips episode. We never considered the first option. We weren't going to do that to our crew, and even if we were callous enough to do so, we never would have been able to finish the season without them. But having grown up on TV in the 80s and 90s, we all dread Clips episodes, where characters sit around saying, "Remember that time when?" and leftover footage is reheated for no one's enjoyment. This led to the infamous clip episode of The Legend of Korra, where it was just a retelling of past events since the creators didn't want to let go of the people who were already working so hard to make the series. And because the show was pushed online, not a lot of people watched it. In fact, not a lot of people even knew that season 4 existed, which is disheartening because it was a season that would have potentially showed the first LGBTQ+ kiss in a kid's cartoon. Korra and Asami were both bisexual women, but because this was airing on the Nickelodeon network, the creators were very limited on what they were allowed to show or to even suggest. They were not allowed to give the couple a kissing scene or even have them say "I love you" or even, "Oh, hey, would you go out with me?" Like a letter that says, "Do you like me, yes or no?" Which is pretty ridiculous considering the predecessor had so many scenes with boy-girl kissing and the finale having Aang and Katara kiss twice or some shit. But what's more of a punch in the mouth is that for Pride Month last year, Nickelodeon tweeted a picture of Korra for the Pride Month celebration. What? They're promoting Korra, even though they completely shit on the show in the past and didn't want to see her kiss or anything. It wasn't until the comics came out that it became canon that Korra was bisexual because they couldn't show it in the show. Don't get me wrong, The Legend of Korra absolutely pales in comparison to Avatar: The Last Airbender. But I think that a majority of it actually comes from The Legend of Korra being a mess from start to finish when it comes to production. Not only was the show already trying to fill in big shoes from its predecessor, it was also hit from every avenue from Nickelodeon not wanting to support the show as much as the original. From scant marketing all the way to huge budget cuts and an unknown future, constantly creating a show every season not knowing if it was going to be prolonged to the next season or if they were going to get another season, it was a miracle that the show was even made at all, which really leads me to wonder what the show could have been like if the franchise had the full support from Nickelodeon from the very beginning. I mean, maybe we could have seen an extended universe told from a different perspective. Maybe the characters could have had a chance to be more fleshed out instead of just rushed. The animation might have been better, but instead, we're kind of just left with The Legend of Korra versus Nickelodeon.